This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech.
Joining me once again as guest co-host is the wonderful Jane Sibbett. Jane is a talented actress and storyteller, best known for her role in Friends, the TV series. Jane is also a writer, producer, director, photographer, advocate, and source conduit. She is one busy woman, and I am grateful to call her my friend. Today we are welcoming Brooke Warner, publishing powerhouse, writer's champion, and now COO of the Stable Book Group, leading the charge in indie publishing. As a co-founder of She Writes Press and host of the Right Minded podcast, Brooke has dedicated her career to helping writers get their stories into the world, traditionally, independently, and everything in between. Brooke, welcome to Believe in People.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, you left traditional publishing to forge your own path with She Writes Press. What was or if there was, what was an aha moment when you knew you had to take that leap? What was it for you?
Oh, it was a big aha moment. It's interesting that you ask because it's the subject of my TEDx talk. I left traditional publishing for a very specific reason, which was that all of the books that I had previously been able to acquire in my life as an editor, I was increasingly not able to acquire because the authors didn't have big enough brands or they didn't have what we call an author platform. And it was a trend, of course, but the big thing that happened was that landed on my desk a book that I really, really wanted to publish about trans families. And it wasn't anything that we had done before. And I had been building up the LGBTQ list for a while. And essentially, my corporate publishing folks said, no, we're not going to take a risk on that. We've done too many trans books. That was the message, which in and of itself was a problem. But then 1 week later, a book about makeup and looking great after 50 came across my desk. And it did not feel particularly feminist for this feminist press that I was working at. Mm-hmm. And everyone was so excited about it and gave me permission to offer the most amount of money I had ever offered on a book before. And that those two things happened so close to one another was not only eye-opening, but was that proverbial straw that broke the camel's back moment for me. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was about 1 year later that I left, just because it took a while to start She Writes Press on the side. But that really was my aha moment.
And what an exciting thing for so many women who have found you, Brooke. And really, especially right now at this moment in our history. Are you just overwhelmed by all the women that are coming forward and saying, this is the only place that I want to be? Because I certainly feel that impulse in my heart.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it is really gratifying. I did have someone just yesterday say to me, you're my top pick. I don't want to publish anywhere else. And I don't have that moment all the time because, of course, people are casting their net and there's lots of different publishing options out there. But I think what we've built at She Writes Press is unique because it's a community. And because women do want to publish with other women authors and they support each other and they go to each other's book launch events. And I think the longer we've been around and the more that these relationships are growing, it's probably the most gratifying thing for me is just to see that circle of support among the authors.
Yeah, I have been at one of your book events for our dear Amy Ferris, and I was so impressed and overwhelmed. And it seemed so unusual to have so many people from She Writes Press coming to support Amy there. Obviously, she has a huge fan base, but also your authors were there to celebrate and shine her up too. Is that happening out in the world normally? Do other authors do this kind of thing? It seems wonderful.
Yes. I mean, I think that what we do that's different is that we let the authors be in touch with each other. You know, many presses just don't encourage that. And we have author calls, and we have a Facebook group, and we let people go through the process together as a cohort. And so they make connections and they intentionally come out and support one another. And that's been true since the beginning. And it's surprisingly unusual in publishing. It's not something that publishers tend to want to do, which is just the simple thing of letting their authors be in touch. So I know that that sets us apart.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I want to find out about the process and how one goes about, submitting something and how that works. But I'm really curious to know, Brooke, what were you like as a kid?
Yes, tell us.
Very funny. I mean, my mom has reminded me that I haven't changed very much. She likes, like, you've always been a Spitfire. You've always been very motivated, kind of get up in the morning and up and running, not a downtime type of girl. I think I was just curious and into stuff. I've always felt very zesty, for just the world is big and there's lots of exciting stuff out there. So I guess I'll just take it from my mom and say I'm probably pretty similar to how I was as a kid.
And your mom was also is also a beautiful writer as well. How much did that influence you?
My mom came to her poetry and writing really late in her life, which has been beautiful to watch. But she was always a big reader. And so I think there's no question that my household was impacted by reading, which is really how I got into publishing. I was not a big writer myself. But definitely a reader. And so when I wanted to do something with my life, I think I was in my 20s, and my mom said, "Well, what do you love?" And I said, "I love reading." And she's like, "Well, have you heard of book publishing? Because that's a thing." And so it was her spark of an idea, just asking me the question, "What do you most love?" that probably did lead me to book publishing in a kind of roundabout way.
And then you have your beautiful son who is also, I love it's, can I just say for a moment, Amy, just to go sideways just for a moment, Brooke may know this because I tend to fangirl her a little bit, but her Right-Minded podcast with Grant was my lifeblood. I mean, you're my walking buddies. And so I feel like I'm in your life a lot more than you even know. And maybe it's a little bit too much, I must confess. But there's so much wisdom given. And I laugh along with you. I mean, I understand now the phenomenon of fangirling because I feel that way about you and Grant. You're like my best friends, but you don't even know it.
Oh my gosh, it's reciprocated. We're sending you all the love through the audio vibes. And plus, Jane will pop up in our text threads every once in a while with a little love message. So I especially appreciate that and know that you're listening.
Oh, there's just so much wisdom, and I hear about your son James too, and about what he's reading, and I think that thread, through family and influence is it's so touching and inspiring. So thank you for all you do there.
Oh, thank you.
Wow,
For that.
you are one busy person. I mean, you just became COO of the Stable Book Group. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is an exciting new partnership. I mean, for me, it's about a partnership. She Writes is moving to a new arena, which is maybe a bigger stage for us, is a partnership with some other publishers. So there are 6 publishers in the Stable Book Group, but we'll also be looking to grow. And so I get to have She Writes in this bigger group of publishing folks who it just allows me to bounce ideas off of people who have as much experience in the industry as I do. I've thought about it a lot as a thought partnership. I'm just very excited to be with a team of people, who cares about books, but who's also been publishing books for as long as I have. And then, of course, there's some stuff about, the boring business stuff about shared efficiencies and resources and things like that. But it really matters because book publishing is the margins in book publishing are notoriously small, minuscule. It's very hard to make money being a book publisher. And even though we're hybrid and we have a different business model, it's still hard because most of the proceeds go back to the author. So we're just dealing with a lot that we're trying to constantly stay ahead of trends and, be interesting and be innovative.
Yeah. And actually, how does that work then? So if somebody's interested, because I see so many writers this are upon us, which is incredible. And now they know during this, especially for with a hybrid model that they now have access. So Brooke, when somebody comes to you with, do they come with the full book or an idea, or how does that work?
I think most people submit to us when they're either done or almost done with a manuscript. I mean, we have a pretty rigorous submissions process, and so it's not the kind of thing that we're really welcoming your first draft. Most people have been through a rigorous editing process, or sometimes they've been agented, they've tried to shop the book traditionally, and then they're circling back as another alternative. Sometimes, like I said, with this woman who came to me, and I was like, you're my first choice, and I'm hearing that increasingly more. But they've often worked with book coaches. They have had, multiple editorial passes. And so I think the reason that people come to us when they're more complete is because they want to come to us and be like, I'm ready and I'll be on your next season. Sometimes people will come to us when they're not ready, and then they'll get feedback from us to that effect, because we will review the assessments and just say, or excuse me, review their manuscripts and give them an assessment that says it's not quite ready, or you need more editing, or you might need to work with a book coach. So we also give a lot of direction.
And you're working on with development now. Something new is coming that can you talk about?
With development, with Grant, you mean?
Is there something else you can talk about? I'm
Yeah,
not sure because I know it. Hasn't been announced, and I might have missed it in the world affairs.
well, I think Grant is talking about it more openly than I am, and that's only because I don't want to overwhelm everyone I know with so many things that I
Okay.
have going on. But it's out there. I mean, Grant and I are partnering to do a memoir, kind of like a memoir hub, a place where people can land if they're interested in writing memoirs. It's called Memoir Nation, but it's not going to be launched until a little bit later this year, but we have begun to plant the seeds.
That's beautiful. So many ways that you're making the world better right now.
That's fabulous. And I think too, I mean, there's it's intimidating, and also there's a trepidation in writing. And I think that many aspiring authors, or they really wrestle with imposter syndrome. So
Mm.
what's the best advice for someone who's kind of stuck, or in the like, who am I to write this mindset? Like, what do you think? What advice could you give them, Brooke?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's definitely one that comes up so often, and I think it's something that can only be worked through. I do think it helps to know that most people feel that way at some point in their writing process. But the thing about writing is, like, I think there are cyclical emotions. And so for everyone who feels I'm not good enough, or who do I think I am, on one day, 3 days later, they're going to be like, I love my book. I'm so happy with this scene. I'm doing an amazing job. And then you'll come back to, who do I think I am again? And you have to just remember that the other side of that is out there. And the more you can also put out into the world that you're doing it and own it and claim it, I think that those voices of resistance, or the mean voices, start to dissipate a little bit. But I don't really know that many people for whom they go away completely ever. And I think it's just important to know that you're not wrong when it shows up, and it certainly doesn't mean you should stop. And the goal is maybe just to quiet them.
Yeah. I know you just came back from another retreat or a workshop situation in another country. What are you seeing with people? How is it changing? How is the landscape changing for you and the people that are coming to you? Do you see a trend with memoir or
I mean, with
women's
memoir,
stories?
I think the trend with memoir has just been ongoing for a long time, that people feel much more empowered to come out and say, my story matters. So, dovetailing on the imposter thing is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm going to do it. My voice and my story need to be heard. And I mean, it's interesting because like I was talking about that flip flop, I mean, some people come to it and are like, my book is so important. It's the most important book in the world. But underneath that, I think they have doubts too. I don't think anyone is coming with their memoir and feeling like completely free from negative self-talk. But what I think is happening is the more memoirs that are published, the more permission giving it is to people who want to do it or who are eager to do it. And so memoir is and has been exploding for a really long time. And my personal feeling is that it changes the culture. It
Mhm.
really does
Great.
show a wider range of experience and make you feel that you're less alone, and it destigmatizes stuff like trauma and, any kind
Yeah.
of lived experience that you might have had, where you say, well, I'm not the only one. People have written books about it, and they're okay, and they've helped other people. And I think that's a really, really meaningful thing, maybe the most meaningful thing about the genre.
Wow, that's interesting. And
Mhm.
I mean, and Brooke, you've been publishing for decades. So I'm just curious if you could like kind of time travel and give your younger self like one piece of advice about this industry, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, just hold on. So it is. I mean, it's really
Right.
wild because I love book publishing. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and it is the Wild West. I actually had someone on my podcast not too long ago who said, book publishing is a dogfight. It's always been a dogfight. That was Michael Castleman, and he wrote The Untold Story of Books. And I loved it because I'm like, yeah, it's a dogfight, and I kind of thrive on that dogfight. I mean, I
Mm.
am really passionate about this, but I will get into, kind of my fighting mode a little bit if it comes to like championing underserved voices or, because the publishing path that I've chosen to represent, hybrid, is an underdog publishing path, and I've fought for it all of these years. And I feel like it's kind of, it's not having its moment, but it's legitimized now in a way that it wasn't 15 years ago. And so it's, yeah, that's it. Just hold on. It's worth it. But it's every day is kind of tough.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw you going in there and writing a note on your Substack, I believe a letter also to bookshop.org, yeah? Because there were some challenges there. And again, can I just fangirl you one more time? Because who else is going to do this? So Amy, in bookshop.org, she was sharing how this is the alternative to Amazon. And
Right.
we know that the Amazon has created a nice, easy way for people to put their books up. But with Bookshop, you want to tell the storybook? Maybe we should tell it and see where we are with it.
I mean, the short version is that Bookshop wants to be an alternative to Amazon, but we were having some real distribution issues with the books being available. And I had talked to them a lot for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I do think, yeah, it's an example of using my platform to say, look, this is not okay because there is a solution, and so it was a love letter, an unrequited love letter. I wrote, hey, we love you and we don't feel the love. And like, how can we do this better? And interestingly, I will say, I don't know if it's as a result of the letter or just because I've been pushing on it so hard, but think there's a meaningful difference in our availability on the platform.
Great.
Wow.
So
Because
we're
yeah, because Bookshop helps get books into the independent bookstores that we really need to be supporting right now, especially in this climate. So
yeah.
thank you for for
Well,
for pushing and
and
making the
and
effort.
for you saying that actually, like, I mean, never before, honestly, is this like the book burning days? I mean,
It is the book
why
burning.
explain why are people deciding what books should stay and what books should go? What is that? This is I
Insanity.
it's
Yeah.
insanity.
I mean, I think we can only look to history to see why it's happening again. If you control and censor what is said, then you control the narrative. It's also a clear attack on vulnerable communities, and that is what we are seeing right now with this administration. The entire MAGA movement wants to silence Black and brown voices, queer voices, minority voices. And
Amen.
the thing is, it doesn't work. It's like, for as distressing as it is, the amount of pushback is really beautiful to see. The book industry does not tolerate this. Librarians are fighting the fight, book publishers are fighting the fight. The authors who are being targeted end up being celebritized.
Yes.
It has a major backlash. And I think, it's honestly sad to watch people, try to strip a book that is meaningful out of a library or, prevent a kid who needs something from getting it. But that's the thing, is these people, their agenda is is to silence, and so we just have to be careful. And I think the other side of silencing is amplifying, right? And
Yeah.
so the other side amplifies. And I think in the long run, the long tail of history shows us that the amplifying voices will win. But we're in a hard moment right now.
We most certainly are. I certainly know a little bit about censorship, and it was just with Friends, that was the highest rated single episode to that point because of all the censorship. So I
Right.
love that you're telling me that they're getting extra celebrity and extra eyes on these books. I know immediately when I saw the book bans, I'm like, I must buy these books. I must
Exactly.
support these authors. So
Yes.
that
Yes. And there are
that's
lists, I mean, there are lists of the authors that are banned and the books that are banned. And so you can go to, I mean, I think it's on the ACLU and it's on Penn and other places. And so that's wonderful too, because if you're thinking about like, what book do I want to buy? Go check out the banned book list. It's a good place to start. Give the gift, you know?
Exactly. It's so true, isn't it? Oh my gosh, Brooke, we're coming close to our end, and it's been, I mean, a minute with you, really. And I want to ask you, because you do so much, but Right Minded, you offers a weekly inspiration for writers. What's a recent insight or from your podcast or somebody you've spoken to that totally shifted your own perspective, if it did at all?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it happens all the time. I think that I'm very moved by my own guests, of course. How could I not be? I think one of the more recent powerful interviews that we did was with Carvel Wallace, who wrote Another Word for Love. And what he said about just the fact that I think the way he framed it, we were asking him about like happiness, and I don't even remember exactly the context of the question, but it was about, whether he had achieved happiness, or again, I'm not sure what the context of the question was, but the way that he just so flatly was sort of like, I don't even really believe in the idea that that's possible, and he started talking about all of the different ways that he approaches his writing, because the book itself is like this complex, layered look at love, and love is neither happy or sad or joyous or tragic. It's all of those things, right? And so I think I learned from him just like the expansiveness that can exist within a single topic, and how you can approach your work with this multi-layeredness. And I for memoirists in particular, I think it's essential to start to see your work that way, because if you hit a monotone note or a sort of single issue note, you're not going to have the kind of resonance that you do with someone like Carvel, who hit, like a symphony style, you know, operatic, gorgeous musical element with his work. And that, I guess, is, just one insight of many.
beautiful.
That's beautiful.
And you're writing.
I'm writing, but oh my gosh, I mean, I've been derailed by my.
Look at her. She drops her head down like
That's
like a
hilarious.
true
Yeah.
author.
What are you writing, Brooke?
Well, I'm working on a memoir, but I have to say the stable book group situation has
Busy.
definitely pulled me away from my
Right.
writing. It's been a multi-month sort of epic situation of getting this deal done. I will say, like, I've never been so business oriented as I have been in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So I will come back to it, but that's kind of, that's the project that's pulling at me, but also just like everyone, I'm struggling, because memoir is
Yes.
very, it sort of makes you realize how vulnerable you are and how exposing it is to put
Yeah.
your personal work into the world.
Yeah.
It's good that you're learning it from the inside out there, Brooke. You were always an empathetic publisher, but now you're like, okay, now I understand why it takes 10 years to write a book.
Oh my gosh, it probably will take me 10 years. Yes. And I always was like, oh, it shouldn't take 10 years. And I'm like, oh, this is why it takes 10 years. Yeah, you're still living it sometimes. So,
Yeah,
So
life is
true.
rich. Life is very
Well,
rich
I
right
can't
now.
believe we're coming to the end, and we ask usually, this is called Believe in People, and we always have a question that we ask all our guests, but I'm going to switch it a little and ask you, Brooke, why should people believe in books?
oh my gosh, for all the reasons, that I feel like this interview has touched upon, but books make us more compassionate people. If we're talking about like, if the purpose of book banning is to silence people or to privilege a majority class, right, or a dominant group, the purpose of reading and what books do is they open your world to other people. I mean, I just read so many memoirs, and many of them are about trauma. Many of them are about things that people have survived. Many of them are about people who have immigrated here from other countries and what they went through in their childhoods. And I think if you see that in a book and you can step into the skin of another person, especially if you're a person of privilege, who hasn't had those kinds of experiences, you can't look at a whole group of people and just be like, you're less than me. You can't. And that's why I think the people in your current administration, they do not read. It's clear they do not read, because if you read, you open your eyes to other people's experiences and ways of life, and you are just a more empathetic person. And so books really save lives in that way. And I think we have to really be fighting for the importance of books and for kids reading for that reason. Because if we see this drop off of reading and the privileging of, TikTok and online communities, it's our kids are going to suffer for it.
Yeah.
So great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and for you sharing your thoughts. Really grateful. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
see
Thank you
why
for
we love her.
Amazing.
having me. So good.
I asked the question about did somebody, who inspired another perspective on Brooke's show, and she's inspiring, and she shares a different perspective about books and the fact that we should be reading more and not and really understanding how important it is.
It's vital lifeblood. I mean, I don't know anybody in my circle that wasn't completely moved by books and wanted to have form their whole life experience about how they're going to face the world. And so even more so to be able to listen to her and see how she's nurturing so many people that are disenfranchised right now, especially, right?
Exactly. Jane, thank you so much for introducing us to Brooke Warner. She's an incredible woman. She's doing so much, and she's building a community, and she's embracing it. And that's what's so special.
It's vital. It's really vital right now, and especially in these times that we come together in community, and she is doing it.
She sure is. She's really doing it. And if you've enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to join our community and subscribe to Believe in People. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Amy.